Okay. Getting my table set up here for you all. Got my young deck. It's about 12 o'clock. And wait for a few more people to show up before I get started. All right, I know that some people are like slowly filing in, and I'm trying to wait like a few minutes um before people show up, but I don't want to wait too long because I got stuff to do. Got stuff to do. Um, this new moon is very interesting, y'all. Man, uh, let's talk about the astrology of this, which is, let me pull up this little chart on my iPad, which is that this new moon is at 20 degrees of sidereal Aries, which means it is trine Saturn, which is just stationed retrograde towards the end of Sagittarius. Let's see here. So a couple things I want to note. Uh, First is I always like to check the most recent transit to I always want to check the most recent transit to the degree of a new or full moon to see if there's any relevant content that occurred during that time. So what I'm looking for is Mars is ahead of all of the planets in the zodiac. And so it means that Mars would have been the first planet to move through Aries and cross this 20 degrees point. So get out your calendars, your journals, your text, your emails, and let's check the date that that Mars transited 20 degrees of Aries. And let's see, this would have been March 20th. I lied. March 7th. March 7th, 2019 would have been the day that Mars transited this degree of 20 Aries, where the new moon will be on Saturday. And that day, Mars was nice and sextile the sun at 22 Aquarius. Um, Looks like it was a few days later catching up to a square with Venus, and it was trine Saturn. What is Aries? I know people like to say Aries is the baby of the zodiac, which sounds dumb to me because babies don't have any autonomy. And Mars represents autonomy, it represents the physical strength to move, the capability of making your body do what you want it to do, right? It's the literal there has to be something in the zodiac that represents this, right? The physical capability of actually doing what it is that you will yourself to do. So I'm going to tell y'all a little bit of a story about fire signs. And you may have heard this before, but you know there's always something new that I bring to the table. Um, so this new moon at 20 degrees Aries is trine a recently stationed retrograde Saturn at about 26 degrees Sagittarius. That means that two of the three fire signs are occupied. And I wonder what's rising um, uh, at the actual full moon. It looks like it's Libra is actually rising. No, Virgo's rising at the time of the full moon, at least in Chicago and on the east coast of the US. But anyway, so fire is about the will. And I was saying this in the video the other day. You cannot remove your will from your body and sit it on the table and examine it, dissect it, measure it, paint it, color it, change it, right? Your will is the animating force of your body and your consciousness. It is the thing that wills your life into being, that moves your life into being, compels. Your will is your volition. And it's so funny because I've been talking a lot about conscious versus unconscious. And fire speaks to us about the conscious use of the will, meaning things that we physically um, do with our body in Aries, the impact that we feel entitled or not to have on our environment and the world around us, which is Leo, excuse me, and Sagittarius, which is the intention of the will. So we call this like fire trine, as it were, the reinforcement of the will. Hey, everybody. Please have some good news for us. Oh, never mind. Turn the volume up helped. Oh, the Gems voice. It's very interesting. You couldn't hear me because your volume was down. Anyway, so when we talk about fire, we are talking about, Lord, I just feel like it's stuff crawling on my face. Um, we're talking about Aries, which is the autonomy of the will, right? When we talk about autonomy, babies, when you're born, you don't have any autonomy. You can't hold your head up. You couldn't get up and walk across the room if you wanted to. You can't even grab objects. You can't even focus your eyes. And so it's really at the very first Mars return, which is the planet that commands or is in control of or has domicile in Aries. It's at the very first Mars return that you can walk, you can run, you can do what you want to do because you possess the physical capability to do so. And if by the time of your Mars return, which is between 17 and 24 months, you cannot walk and move and do all of these things that are markers of the beginning of autonomy, we know that there might be something developmentally, physiologically wrong. So Aries is representing the physical quality of willing the body into movement. When we have a new moon in Aries, we ask the question, how are you physically embodying your will to move, right? So you can say, I am compelled and impelled and have the strength and the courage to move my body, right? To lift this box, to walk. Hello, Cursed Runaway. Or you can say, I have the authority to make this thing happen. What is authority without capability? That's a really great question to ask. What is being in the position of power, having the authority to make a thing so, without actually possessing the capability? It's very interesting. Inept authority, right? And then we would say, what is the capacity to move without the intention, right? The conscious intention to move. We call that instinct, right? Instinct is the capacity or compulsion to move physically without the conscious awareness of it, right? So instinct is this fire is hot and you didn't know that it was recently on, but you touched the stove. Let me see if I can turn it up. Okay, I turned the volume up a little bit. Y'all should be able to hear me just a little bit better here. Um, so right, you didn't know the stove was on and you touch it because you want to clean it, and instinct says you remove your hand, right? You're not consciously saying I'm going to remove my hand because I now realize this is hot. No, this is your will, the will to live and survive, wanting to sustain itself by keeping you from burning your hand, right? So when we talk about Aries, we are talking about both the instinctual will to move and we are talking about the conscious will to act. And the sun is exalted in Aries because when the mind is under the command of the will, as it were, it means that we think on purpose, right? That our mind is a tool of the will, that we can will our minds to do a certain thing, we can will our bodies to do a certain thing. In the 2019, let me find it. Hold on, children. I'll be right back. But I found it right here for you. 2019 Sidereal Astrology Guide here. And mine is all jacked up because I've been using it, although I haven't written for May yet. So let's talk about my fill in the blank here for the 2019 Sidereal Astrology Guide. We've got the new moon in Aries. And the fill in the blank I've created for this is exercising my strength of will begins a new story. What does it mean to exercise your strength of will? It means to do something because you want to, because you can. Not needing a reason, not needing a purpose, not needing the agreement, input, or opinion of other people, right? Now, these might be real factors in your capacity or ability to do something, right? Especially if you have Libra in your chart, then the input and opinions of other people, the impact that it has on the world around you is something that you're aware of. Where if you don't have any Libra, but you have Aries, or you have Aries and you don't have any air signs in your chart, then your own will is the sole reference point for moving, being, and doing. So in this particular new moon, and I'm shuffling the cards as I talk here, in this particular new moon, um, it is trine Saturn and Sagittarius. Now remember, the ongoing story of Saturn and Sagittarius is, how do I make my life a living testimony of my intentions and convictions, given that I shall not live forever? Given that there is a real existential threat to my body, given that I don't know everything, I cannot perceive everything. So what is my motivation for functioning in this world? How do I deal with the limits? How do I situate myself against the walls and ceilings and floors that press upon me, creating limits in my world? And it says that your intentions and convictions are the metric for how you establish yourself in the world, and for what you're building, and for what you're creating, and how you deal with limits. So Saturn and Sagittarius says, yeah, the measure for what's possible in my life actually is not the way that things have always been done. I believe, right? My intention is to, and intention is not rooted in the practical or pragmatic. At least as far as Sagittarius is concerned, intention is rooted in conviction. What has life led you to believe is possible? What vision takes hold of you that you feel compelled to manifest in the world around you, right? So when we have both intention and capability, we can really make some things happen. So I ask you, what intentions do you have in your Sagittarius life? And what opportunities are coming in your Aries house? What opportunities allow you, create space and room for you to act upon your intentions? What opportunities give you the capability to move, either literally or figuratively? Let's get started. I've been looking forward to this. I've come to look forward to this every couple of weeks, doing a tarot reading for the new and full moon. We've got the new moon in Aries today, and the full moon will be in Scorpio. So this gives us a very Mars-tinged month. At this new moon, Mars in Taurus actually is in charge of the new moon, and it is applying a tight opposition to Jupiter in Scorpio. And I've been thinking a lot about this. This perfects next week, but it definitely is a major way of understanding this new moon and kind of the background and foreground narrative for Aries and all of these planets that are in Mars-ruled signs, which is at this new moon, it's going to be Sun and Moon, Mercury, and Jupiter, all in Mars-ruled signs. And so that opposition between Mars and Jupiter, that is a really volatile aspect. I'm not going to lie. It's very volatile because Mars is like, oh, well, I can, so I will. But in Taurus, it's like you can't because you care what other people think and you want to be validated and accepted and you want to be a part of community. So that means your will is subservient to your need to adapt, conform, and assimilate. Except for Mars is opposed Jupiter in Scorpio. And Jupiter is asking us what we need to do to survive. It's asking us what kind of adaptations have we embodied as a matter of habit or made a part of our identity, when in fact it was an adaptation that we took on in order to survive. So how can you see who you are, right, through the lens of, oh, wait a minute, that's not really me. That's not really my voice. That's not really my truth. This is something that I've taken on as a belief or way to understand the world because I had to survive. And we don't always do those things consciously. So with that being said, an opposition is always like, well, you can't go too far in one direction. You can't, it's a slingshot. If you go too Mars and Taurus, meaning if you go too much Well, my autonomy and my freedom don't matter because I really just want to be accepted and validated, and I'm not willing to pay the cost of ostracization or exile or rejection. Right? Mars and Taurus is definitely very wary of rejection and aware of how people are responding. You know, one of the things that's been coming up in my readings a lot as we approach this opposition of Mars and Taurus and Jupiter and Scorpio is codependence. And codependence really being just a survival strategy, right? Codependence is saying that this person who I am in relationship with, and it starts with caregivers because these are people we generally cannot opt out of, right? We need them to survive. And so codependence is like, I need this person to survive, and yet this person is emotionally volatile in a way, or I cannot anticipate how, when, or where this person will meet my needs. So the codependence comes because me over here trying to regulate the emotions of the person over there by how I respond. Now, this is a basic thing, right? We don't, we want to get something from someone, and so we don't say, "Hey, give me my," right? We say, "Hey, how you doing? What you been up to? You want some of mine?" Right? Yeah, so I was wondering, right? We do all of that because we're priming the pump. We want to regulate the response of the person in front of us so we can get something. But codependence happens when we can no longer advocate for our own needs, right? And we are trying to protect ourselves from the emotional response of this person, or we're trying to control their emotions, right? Because we can't handle whatever their reaction or response. A lot of time codependence comes and we strip the people we're in relationship with from their agency because we're unwilling to stand up for ourselves. We get so caught up in regulating their emotional reaction to us that we forget about our own needs and desires. And so at this Mars in Taurus opposed Jupiter in Scorpio opposition, where have you failed to advocate for yourself because you've gotten too caught up in trying to regulate the response of another person? Or where have you not straight up just gone for what you wanted or asked for what you wanted, because you maybe are unaware of the dynamic of codependence in your relationships, as it were. That's enough astrology. Let's read these cards. What guidance do the cards have for us at this full moon? I'm excited. New moon at 20 degrees Aries sidereal. And let me shuffle a couple more times. The card on the bottom is going to be our significator for this reading. It's going to be the context and reference point for everything else that we see in this reading. We're going to be watching for patterns in suits, numbers maybe. We're going to be watching for not only what suits are in the reading, but are there any missing? All right, all of those things are important. I'm going to shuffle 2 more times and then I'm ready. All right. Golden Thread Tarot, everyone is always asking. All right. Oh, this card has been coming up in like every tarot reading. Okay, here we go. This is the 10 of Swords. This is the card on the bottom of the deck when we cut. I just noticed that this person's like whole body is cut in half. Ooh, and the word for that. The word for experiencing all of these swords coming through your body. You standing there with your hands on your hips like, yep, that's what's happening here, right? The top half of your body disconnected from the bottom half of your body. Blood, right? That is dissociation to me. Dissociation is the act of not identifying with what is happening to you or your body, and oftentimes rationalizing or trying to reconcile what is happening. Jessica Dore posted the card of the day yesterday, and I think it was the 7 of Swords, can't remember, but she was talking about betrayal blindness. And betrayal blindness is a concept that I've been referencing that I didn't know it existed when I'm talking about Jupiter and Scorpio. And betrayal blindness, as I understand it, is the sense that as I mentioned earlier, just now in this video, there are certain relationships we cannot opt out of, right? Like if your friend is doing you bogus, most of the time people are like, man, I ain't checking for her no more. We fell out. We ain't friends no more. We're not cool. For most of us, somebody is doing us wrong in a relationship, and we like, skip that, right? But betrayal blindness is this sense that someone has been engaging in behavior that says to you that they are unsafe, they are being dishonest, they are not being loyal or faithful or truthful. But with our caregivers, we cannot opt out of those relationships, right? So let's say your mom is so emotionally and verbally abusive, right? She withholds from you, she stonewalls you, she gives you the silent treatment, she rages on you, right? Never can level, it's always your fault, right? Now, as a kid, you don't necessarily have the language to articulate these things, and you don't necessarily understand them. And so we can either internalize that narrative and make our mother's behavior something about who we are, right? But oftentimes we are trying to reconcile the fact that we depend upon our mothers for survival with the fact that they're not safe. And so we, instead of fighting or flighting, which is running, we freeze. And freezing is going numb and almost ignoring the betrayal that's happening. Now we carry this into our adult relationships because we're gathering the clues of our partner behaving in a certain way, but we don't really notice them. Like we can't see them until one day we can't ignore it anymore, and all of the clues really, really obvious. So that's one concept that comes up for me. But I think dissociation is part of this whole idea of betrayal blindness, because dissociation is really like kind of mentally objectifying what's happening and saying, well, this is not happening to me. This is happening because maybe it's not happening at all. And then finally, this image here of this person's like top half of their body being disconnected from the bottom half of their body, to me really speaks of the lack of connection between intention and will, intention and capability, right? If the bottom half of your body is what actually moves your body, right? The top half of the body is the thinking part of the body, and the bottom half of the body is like the more physical moving part of the body. And so I would ask with that Ten of Swords, in what ways have your will to do something been disconnected from the actual capability to do something, or rather the intention and motivation of taking a certain action or making your life a living testimony of your intentions and convictions? How has that been disconnected from the actual capability to make it happen? And if you've been following, I've been talking about this. I've been saying that, there are things that are motivating us that we are unaware of. And we think that we're making a conscious decision to do something when in fact, this is just a habitual adaptation we've taken on in order to deal with the rejection, the trauma, the abandonment. And so how can we reconnect our will and intention? I think that's the question of the Ten of Swords. All right, first three cards here. Seven of Swords, and I'm doing this, so I'm going to put this in the middle here. Seven of Swords, King of Wands, and what else do we have here? The Knight of Cups. All right. Okay. All right, Seven of Swords. There's more swords here. Swords are always about thoughts, concepts, ideas, using our brains, our intellect, our logic as the tool to solve a problem. Even if the problem is not an intellectual or logic one, right? Sometimes it is an emotional one. Sometimes it is one that requires you to tap into your desire or will. We've got three different suits here. We've got the Seven of Swords, right? Swords is generally air, and I don't know if you can see that. There you go. King of Wands, which is fire. King of Wands is the entitlement to act, right? The entitlement to change and have an impact on the world around you. The king sets the standard. The king sets the agenda. The king says, this is my house, and these are the rules in my house. And if you want to be in my house, then these are the rules. There's no logic. There's no rationality. Now, there might be behind it, but in essence, when it gets down to the get down, this is my house. And so when you come in my house, you're going to do what you're supposed to do in my house, or you can leave, right? That's the King of Wands. And this is good and this is bad sometimes, right? It's really important to be able to understand what your territory is and to take claim and dominion over that. So when we see the Seven of Swords and the King of Wands together, the Seven of Swords tells me that there is a problem to be solved. Sevens are kind of awkward and uncomfortable at times, but the Seven of Swords comes up in readings with clients sometimes when there's actually like a mechanical problem, right? Something that needs to be fixed, logistics that need to be worked out. Some of the classic significations of the Seven of Swords have to do with the lone wolf. But in essence, this is about doing something on your own, whether solving a problem on your own or really figuring out how to make something happen on your own using your intellect. This is independence of mind and really tapping into the capability of your own intellect, the capability to find solutions to problems and solve them on your own, though, right? In contrast, we would see the Three of Pentacles representing consulting a professional, like taking your car to the mechanic, versus the Seven of Swords figures it out on their own. We see the Three of Pentacles indicating perhaps teamwork and collaboration and coming together with other professionals or people who possess the skills that you need that will shore up your own expertise, as it were. But the Seven of Swords here is talking to us about what resourcefulness of mind do you possess in order to solve problems, find solutions, and figure out the logistics of your life. The King of Wands here is in fact about not only possessing the capability and finding the kind of inner intellectual or mental resourcefulness in order to, again, solve a problem, fix something that's broken, or establish some logistics for making something happen. The King of Wands is saying, how are we actually taking that real capability that we have in an intellectual sense and flexing it, right? It makes me think of knowing how to do something but not having the confidence and sense of entitlement that gives you the courage to do it. If we reference this back to the Ten of Swords, there is this sense of, again, your conscious intentions being disconnected from the actual capability to do something. You see, this person's body is totally cut in half, right? So how are your conscious intentions, right? Your push to make your life a living testimony of your intentions and convictions disconnected from the physical capability to do something. And because these are swords here, we know there's not an actual problem. We know that there's not actually something outside of you that's creating this disconnect. This is an internal issue, right? This is an internal issue that's saying, as much as I know that this is what I want my life to look like, as much as I know that I am convicted and compelled to be this person, to make this particular Sagittarius, as it were, house topics of our life, your life, my life, a living testimony of what it is that I believe. What is the disconnect here? Why have I not been able to become this person, to live and live what I preach and believe? Here we have the Seven of Swords and the King of Wands, right? Understanding that sevens often mean you got to work with it a little bit, right? Sometimes you got to unloosen a screw, turn it over, take it apart, put it back together. But we're doing this in order to tap into the entitlement to have an impact, the authority to have an impact on the world around us. Remember, I was giving you this whole story of fire signs, and I said that Aries was the capability of the will. Leo is the authority of the will, because I said so. This is my house. Now you can step. You ain't got to go home, as Martin would say, but you got to get the hell up out of here. Step, Gina, step. Leo is that. And then, of course, Sagittarius is the intention, the fuel, the motivation, right? Then we have, right, and so that, and that really is what this King of Wands is about, right? The fire of entitlement. Healing, how can we heal the disconnect? Then we have the Knight of Cups. This complicates things because this is water. And The Knight of Cups, I feel like, has shown up in every reading that we've done so far. Um, that I've done since I did that, what was it, a full moon in Virgo tarot reading back in March. The Knight of Cups can be really wishy-washy because the Knight of Cups is like, ooh, I feel like this is what I want. Yes, this is it right here. And the next day the Knight of Cups is like, no, this is not what I want. I I want this instead. So in this context, because the fire and the water are kind of mm, complicating things here, we can read it as, you know, not having a clear sense of what it is that you actually want, complicating your capacity to establish authority in your life and kind of tinker with. It's so funny because I was literally saying how you cannot take your will outside of your body and sit it on the table and paint it and replace screws and call up the 1-800 number and order a new part and take it out, right? Like the will doesn't work like that, right? We have the will is like a muscle, right? We can work it, we can exercise it, we can, you know, strengthen the will by being in situations that present obstacles and challenge us and push through them anyway and recognize the resistance and push through it anyway. We can refine the will by understanding when it's not a matter of willpower to make things happen. And so these cards are telling me that the disconnect that you've been experiencing and really trying to make your life an embodiment of your politics, make your life an embodiment of your spiritual truth, make your life an embodiment of the moral conviction that drives you, right? The disconnect here between that and actually making the moves to make it happen is because of the complicated nature of the moment we stand in. There is the logical kind of logistics, mechanical approach of the Seven of Swords that's saying that, okay, this is just a problem that needs to be solved, and all I need to do is find the right tools to make it happen. And this works well with the King of Wands, right? If someone is possessing the authority and entitlement to make something happen in their lives and they can turn around and have a book next to them that kind of teaches them, then they can make informed decisions and exercise their authority kind of smartly. But the Knight of Cups is talking to us about those things that complicate our capacity to exercise our will, like trauma, like fear, like not really knowing what we want because we're afraid to ask for what we want. We're afraid that we won't get it. Fear of rejection, right? That it's not always a matter of I've willed myself to do it and I've got the tools, so I'm going to do it, right? What is that je ne sais quoi, that thing that's like, girl, you better not, they better not, right? What is this other thing that's complicating your capacity to really exercise your will? Don't yell at me, Pamela. All right, next three cards here. Eight of Wands, the Star, and Seven of Cups. Ooh, these cups are just going to ruin my whole reading. Because there's like this column on the right side of cups. And I'm just like, really? Why can't we just get our fire? But I think that has a lot to do with the fact that Mars is opposed Jupiter at this new moon in Aries. Mars is the domicile ruler of Aries. And I think that Jupiter in Scorpio and, Mars in Taurus opposed Jupiter in Scorpio is the complicating mitigating factor. But alas, here we are. We got more wands. We've got the Eight of Wands here. This is about the rapid progression of things. This is about things happening quickly, things resolving, things approaching, right? The Eight of Wands often speak of something approaching. And next to the star is in contrast to, I wouldn't say in contrast, I would say it can be an addendum to the Seven of Swords and the King of Wands, because the star is about envisioning. It is about the vision, being able to see something, right? This goes back for me to this whole fire trine, the reinforcement of the will, as it were, and that you can have the authority to act and the capability to act, but do you have the vision? Can you see? Or Are your actions just rooted in instinct and your habitual patterns of survival? Um, and you say you want to do this thing, but you can't identify what's keeping you from doing it because you have no vision. And the vision allows us the objectivity to disconnect from the voices in our heads that repeat the same story over and over again about who you are and how your life works, never even stopping to see if the story is still relevant, never even stopping to see if your present experiences align with this story, right? There becomes a point where identity can become dogma. When identity becomes dogma, who you are and how you see yourself and the narrative of yourself is rooted not in a mindful presence to your current circumstances, not in a vision of possibility that disconnects from those narratives, but an instinctual embodiment of those narratives and an enmeshment with your identity. When you are enmeshed with your identity, how can you ever become someone new? How can you ever do anything different than what you've always done if you are enmeshed with your identity? When identity becomes dogma, we're disconnected from the vision that allows us to perceive ourselves differently than what we've always been, right? You got to see it to believe it, right? So with these cards here, I am asking you, where has your identity become dogma? Where has your identity been subservient to sustaining narratives of self-preservation? This is so hard because we often just don't realize that our self-perception even has been shaped by the survival instinct. But this is what makes us spectacularly human, that we can objectify even our sense of self. We can disconnect and dissociate from the narratives of identity so that it's no longer dogma, right? Who you are is a belief system too. And guess what? You don't have to believe it anymore. You can tell a new story. So they are loud today, Maya, and I'm tired of it. I don't even want to go back and watch this. We've got the Seven of Cups here, and the Seven of Cups is really continuing this Knight of Cups story. Here's the Seven of Cups here really follows quite logically after this Knight of Cups. There is something to be said for identifying with desire and objectifying desire. When you identify with desire, you are unable to question what you want and you take it at face value. Well, if I want it, I need it, I must have it. But the Seven of Cups talks about objectifying desire. Really being able to say, that's interesting that I want that. Why? Why do I want that? The Seven of Cups talks to us about perceiving the outcome and consequences of a desire. And where the Knight of Cups is kind of instinctually led by desire, the Seven of Cups is saying, whoa, do you even want that? Are you sure? Right? The Seven of Cups reminds me of what I was talking about the other day on that video I didn't put up on YouTube yet, where I was talking about Gemini and mutable madness and eclipse season and saying you're allowed to change your mind. And changing your mind is not only saying I want something different. Changing your mind means changing your mind, the way that you think, and changing the way that you think and perceive, right? Giving you a new perspective on your own desire. Let's keep going and wrap this baby up. How long have we been on here? 40 minutes. I'm doing good. Usually by this time, it's already been an hour by the time I get to this bottom row. All right. Ooh, Magician. Oh, I love the way these cards look. Queen of Swords and Six of Swords. There is a lot of air in this. Here's the Magician. Hold on, let me make sure y'all can see it. Here's the Magician in the Golden Thread Tarot. Here is the Queen of Swords. So many swords in this reading. kind of standing in a portal. Here's the Six of Swords. There's a lot of swords. 10, 7, Queen, and 6. That's 4. 2 cups, 2 wands, and 2 major arcana. As always, I'll take a picture of this and post this on Twitter so y'all can see the full layout here. Magician. I have to show you. Hold on. So you can see how my mind works and how I read these cards. Oh, shoot. Oh. Okay. Here we go. This column is so important. The 7 of Swords, the 8 of Wands, and the Magician. That's like a really nice column there. Then we have the King of Wands, Star, and Queen of Swords, Knight of Cups, 7 of Cups, 6 of Swords. Again, it's such a nice story in these cards. I love it when the cards make sense here. Magician. This is really such a linear connection to the 7 of Swords. The Magician is the master of ceremonies. He has all 4 suits sitting on the table. He has a wand, a sword, a pentacle, and a cup. These are tools to him, right? Like Mercury. These are tools. And the Magician possesses the knowledge and the capability to make something happen. Sometimes it appears like magic when somebody does something so fantastic, like watching a Beyonce performance, right? When we watch a Beyonce performance, it's like, how does she will her body to dance on stage and sing for 2 hours? She practiced for 8 months. 8 months. As a side note, I hate when people say, you got the same 24 hours in a day as Beyonce. No, I don't, actually. Right? Beyonce got somebody to watch her kids. She got money to pay people to cook, wake her up, drive her. I don't have the same 24 hours because one of Beyonce hours is worth like 1 month for me, right? But anyways, the Magician speaks to us about possessing both the capability and the will. And this is just going back to this 10 of Swords again. Why is there a disconnect between your intentions and your actions? Why do you say you are doing this thing, saying this is the motivation, this is your intentional why, and except your actions don't embody that? Why? There's nothing wrong with you, except that maybe we have a problem of perception here. And the problem with the perception is you think that you are choosing something consciously when you are choosing it out of your trauma. You are choosing it out of your dysfunction. You are choosing it out of your identity, which has become dogma. Dogma means when you take something as truth that's not rooted in your personal capacity to verify something, right? So dogma is like you believe everything that somebody tells you without ever stopping to think or see if you can perceive it yourself. You take someone else's perception and verification as truth. When your identity becomes dogma, you believe the stories that other people tell about who you are without ever stopping to see if you can verify that as truth with your own perception. When your identity becomes dogma, you lack the vision to perceive yourself as someone different than who you've always been. When your identity becomes dogma, the narrative of self is one that you are emotionally attached to rather than a vision you are embodying. The Magician has both the strength of will and capability to actualize the vision of a new self. Spirit is like using my lips to talk. I have no clue what I just said. Um, Woo! Sorry, don't remember. Don't ask me. I'm gonna have to watch this video to tell you. Um, then we have the Queen of Swords here. I'm gonna just go ahead and say it. The Queen of Swords is that bitch. If you need somebody to say something that needs to be said without holding back, I feel like the Queen of Swords is the antidote for codependence, because the Queen of Swords understands how to use language adeptly. She knows how to cut straight to the noogie boogie doogie soogie woogie center of it, right? She knows how to not pull no punches. She don't spare your feelings. She's not trying to intimidate you, or he's not, or they aren't trying to intimidate you. The Queen of Swords is not even trying to hurt your feelings. But what the Queen of Swords is not going to do is try to regulate your emotional response by withholding the truth. Can you be codependent with an identity, refusing to see who you really are because you don't want to deal with the feelings that come up when you acknowledge the truth of yourself? I'd say yes. Six of Swords. One of the keywords that keeps coming up across these cards: vision, perspective, being able to see something. When you can see something, it means that you are consciously aware of it. When you are consciously aware of it, it is no longer on autopilot and it is no longer instinct. I saw my spiritual director today, and I articulated a lot of fears I have about certain changes happening in my life, and fears about things that have happened in the past and all of this stuff. And one of the things that my spiritual director had really pointed out to me, and another friend had to, a few people, is that once you're conscious that something is happening or that you're doing something, that's like 80% of the work, right? The problem is when you are unconscious. When we go back to this Knight of Cups, and the Knight of Cups is just led by instinct, led by desire, right? Led by the unconscious implicit memory of their bodies. They are not conscious and aware of why they are making certain decisions, why they want a certain thing, why they're behaving a certain way, why there is even a disconnect between their intention and their actions, right? Believing and saying that you want to do this thing, but you're not. You're doing the total opposite, right? And so the intentions behind your actions not aligning with the actual actions themselves, right? So the Knight of Cups next to the King of Wands is really telling us that the intellect is not the appropriate tool for healing this disconnect. You cannot make spreadsheets and write lists, right? You got to get into your body. You have to get into your will. The only way to exercise the will is to use it. So I'm talking about vision because being able to perceive what the Knight of Cups is doing, right? What it is that you're doing when you are moved by something you are unconscious. Now it's in your conscious awareness, right? So say that you have been motivated by the fear of rejection. Maybe you've been motivated by the fear that you're not good enough and you actually cannot do it, that you actually do not possess the capability of do it, but you're not conscious of this, right? So you sabotage, right? You sabotage, you choose the wrong person, you trick yourself into thinking that you can do something, right? It's kind of like the narcissist who is feels woefully inadequate, but like always is telling themselves that they're the greatest, they're the biggest, and it's just like, boo, you're not, right? So you keep wanting to prove to yourself that you are not exactly what you are, rather than addressing the real issue, which is the fear. So the Six of Swords gives us the clarity of mind and perception to bring that which is unconscious into our conscious awareness. I'll say that again, I think. The Six of Swords gives us the clarity of mind that allows us to perceive that which is unconscious and bring it into our conscious awareness. When you bring something into your conscious awareness, you can see it and you can decide that it is not who you are. This is when dissociation becomes a good thing. When you don't believe everything that you think and you don't identify with all of your thoughts, because your thoughts are not always coming from a conscious source. You don't think on purpose. Like my son told me yesterday, he said, Mommy, sometimes when I'm thinking something, I get mad at my mind because it thinks of it wrong, right? He's literally saying that there are unconscious motivations and thoughts that enter my mind that I'm not in control of. And when I'm going on one stream of thought, something comes in and disrupts that, and now I'm over here. So when you are exercising your will and saying, yes, this is what I want to do, I'm choosing it, I'm being this person. When in fact, this is just the habitual response that you've adapted and taken on in response to some childhood stuff, right? Or to some other trauma you've experienced in your adulthood, or some particular experience that has kind of shaped this part of you. I don't even really know if I have anything else to say about these cards, man, because this was kind of heavy today. I know y'all think fire is cute and Aries is all about let me get my way, but obviously the cards think otherwise. I think the star being at the center of this is so important, and that vision is so important, perception is so important, and really being able to bring things into your consciousness so that you can really act with intention. You can't act with intention when your intentions are unknown to you, when your intentions are rooted in something unconscious. And this is the work of therapy. This is the work of dream work. This is the work of tarot. This is the work of astrology. This is the work of all tools of divination. This is why I call what I do divination for liberation, because sometimes the liberation is being liberated from the dogma of identity, of codependence on an identity, having to tell a certain story about who you are when it's not even true anymore. But you don't know how to grasp onto the vision of possibility of being something different. And sometimes other people's perceptions are so helpful in that. Sometimes other people's perceptions allow us to see ourselves differently. And if we can see ourselves through the eyes of other people, perhaps we might get a different view. Perhaps we might be able to see possibility as something different than what we previously thought. Maybe the limitations that are perceived by our own minds don't exist for other people. And when we operate in community and connection, we can perceive things that we did not perceive before. I think that I don't really have anything to say. I'm gonna have to go back and watch this video again. Do y'all have any questions for me? This was a lot, man. Man, this was cool. I don't have nothing else to say. Y'all have any questions for me? I'm gonna be watching the chat box here. And I'm going to put this reading up. I'll make a few announcements. What are my announcements? Eclipse reading. The eclipse special is still going on. I believe that I'm booked. Maybe I have one or two more appointments at the last week of May, but I believe I'm booked all of May for the eclipse reading. So that means I've got the first 2 weeks of June, and that's it. And some folks have already taken advantage of that. So if you are wanting to participate in my eclipse special reading, which I do every year as we come upon eclipse season, you need to book because it's going to be gone. It's a $90 reading, which is a pretty good discount. I think that's about $15 off what I would normally charge for something like this. And in the eclipse reading, we look specifically at the houses in your chart that have Gemini and Sagittarius. We look at your own Mercury and Jupiter and understand the natal promise of your mutable houses. And then we put together your eclipse story, really looking at the narrative across time that is being established by these eclipses in Gemini and Sagittarius. I think that's it. I'm going to be putting up a blog post soon about lunar return charts. Do you know what a lunar return chart is? Have you ever used one? Yeah, I'm excited about that. I've been working on a lunar return workbook that's going to be in my store soon. And this workbook will show you how to read your own lunar return. You don't want to miss that. That's all I've got. I'm about to stop this stream, and I don't even know how to do that. Oh, end stream. Bye. Happy new moon.